Very welcome everyone to this panel discussion. This is part of Intonal celebrating 10 years. And I'm very happy to have 3 guests with me and happy to have you here listening. And we also have a recording of the event. So if anyone sees this afterwards or want to go back and check what was said, you can do that too. This specific event is realized in collaboration with Media Evolution. That's also where you find it, the video recording afterwards. But for now and for here today, we focus on who's in this room. And also, I need to tell you that in case of any emergency, there are emergency exits. If you look the other way and to the left, past the elevator, there are stairways down. And there's also one behind me, further down this corridor. If you want to find a toilet, there's back there to the left. My name is Mattias Holmberg. I will be the moderator of this. And I'm very happy to be here again, I will say. I've been part of this, helping out with this festival in the past. And even if Intonal is celebrating 10 years, there are many more years behind that many people have been working, meeting each other, helping each other out, building an ecosystem of individuals, organizations, and even building audiences together. Here in Malmö, of course, but also in the whole Öresund region, in Europe, and beyond. And that is also what you can see in this program. Many of the things here comes from building that ecosystem. What you also can see is there's money funding this, like SHAPE, for example. That's European Union funding it. So these ecosystems are also supported in different ways by the people working, by venues and organizations, venues like Intonal. And those venues need a place to be. There's a need for space, because these spaces offer opportunities. And where we are right now, and we're happy to be here, of course, at Inter Art Center, part of Lund University, is also such a place, offering opportunities for artistic development, collaborations, and then down the stairs we have Inkonst, where you can meet the audience. These are all part of ecosystems, and I call them here cultural ecosystems. And we're gonna talk about that with our 3 guests. You in the audience will be invited at the end and somewhere in between. We'll see where I find some time. So if you have a question, hold on to it and there will be an opportunity. We have a microphone and so on to give you an opportunity to raise it. Now I have talked enough, so I will introduce our guests. And I will start with one after the other. We have furthest away from me, Patric Kiraly, all the way from Uppsala Municipality, where Patric works as a project manager for at the Department of Culture. And you were also the main responsible person for Uppsala Municipality's bid for European Capital of Culture 2029.
True.
That won't happen, but you will tell us all other things that will happen and what you're working with. We have Katja Lindqvist, Associate Professor at Lund University. I think it's Department of Service Studies. Lund University in Helsingborg. You have written many things. You have something with your hair. We should look at that later. And you recently were in Gothenburg, for example, presenting the spaces for cultural actors. We come back to that. And closest to me, and also closest, our closest guest, only from Copenhagen, almost from Malmö. We have Mathias Nordby, strategic urban planner and founder of Copenhagen Creative Partnership. And I will start with you, Mathias. You founded this Copenhagen Creative Partnership because you saw that spaces and opportunities for cultural actors in Copenhagen got more and more reduced, and they were pushed away towards the outskirts of the city, a thing you can see in many other cities too. But then you decided that something needs to be done. And then my question is, of course, I want to start with this. Why are actors within the creative sector and the cultural actors important for Copenhagen and to have them not only in the outskirts?
That's a good question, and thanks for the invitation, first of all, Matthias. And I think I want to start by telling a short story from my time at the City Hall where I worked before I founded Copenhagen Creative Partnership, because I worked as an urban planner at the City Hall in Copenhagen, and it was the decade of housing, like 10 years ago, I used to call it, where at a moment our chief planner said to all of us at the office, you have to come inside the Oasis, which is like a conference room at the City Hall. It's not an oasis at all, but that's how municipalities work sometimes. But because there was a surprise for us. And it was in the beginning of January in 2018, and there was a really the biggest cake I've ever seen. And in the middle of the cake, I don't know if you have that in Sweden, but like a cake person.
A cake person?
Yeah, like a cake.
We wish we had.
In Danish, it's called a kageman, which is like a cake formed as a person. No, okay, that's something Danish apparently. But there was a big cake, and on the stomach it said 6,800 new houses, and that was a record for new built houses since before Second World War. And it was really a huge thing because the last 10 years we worked so hard on creating new houses because of population growth, and it was just like a really amazing moment. And then, like a couple of years afterwards, when we then visited the new areas where all the new Copenhageners lived, it was just like, wow, this is some people would call them living machines, housing machines. It's really neighborhoods without any identity, without any atmosphere. It's only like just housing. And for me personally, it was like a wake-up call for, okay, we can't just build our way out of the population growth or solve it that way. We also have to create some attractive cities and neighborhoods. So to answer your question, from my point of view, why are the creative sector important? First of all, it's of course creating a more mixed city, which I guess all of us want. It creates more atmosphere, more soul. And it also attracts, foreigners, talents to the city because it becomes more attractive. And I think it's especially in Copenhagen, the last 10 years, there has been so much focus on just building new houses that we forgot to also remind us of what is a good city. And the creative sector, the cultural sector, is really important in that sense. And I believe that many politicians are also trying to, they're now also like getting focused on why the creative sector is important, and that's also why we created Copenhagen Copenhagen Creative Partnership, to bring different sectors together to like help the creative sector, but also the urban developers, because often the urban developers are like the bad guys in this context, but many of them also can see a good business case in creating more creative and more attractive neighborhoods. So that's also something that we are trying to do. But basically, to answer the question, why are they important? Because they're creating a more attractive and nice city.
And that brings us back to a person that was important in urban planning and perhaps even more city branding 25, 30 years ago, but still it is, Richard Florida, who took and popularized this idea of creative class. And the creative class is, of course, people working with within the creative and cultural business. And that is also the groups that many cities want to attract, because they can be innovative, create new jobs, and so forth. But there's also other cultural actors that doesn't do that. Then I turn to you, Katja, because you have been researching on this creative businesses and cultural businesses. In Sweden, it's called sometimes, now I think it's KKB, it's been KKN, it's been KKS, it shifts all the time, but it's an attempt to collect and talk about cultural and creative sector.
Or businesses.
Or businesses. And this, of course, tries to collect many different kind of actors. But at the same time, it says that these are important in some way for society. So I start with a big question for you, Katja. Why is art and culture important for society? And then from your research perspective.
Yeah.
So you don't have to answer the big question.
Well, from my research perspective, I would say that culture is society. Culture is civilization. It's a human element. People, when they have some kind of civilization, they engage in culture. So society is very much based on culture, and there is a long discussion here. I won't go into that, but I think the question of that we could maybe discuss here is what is the economy of culture, and who is going to pay for culture in society? That's a completely different question. I do think that we all agree that culture is central, but who should pay for culture? I think that's the big societal issue today. Starting with that, I can also just mention that my perspective on these questions is really that I'm an art historian, but I did my PhD in business administration, and that's really sort of the combination that I have in my approach. This means that I have been looking at artistic production, but also looking at the economy of artistic production. What are the conditions that need to be there, or what are the conditions that limit culture production in different spheres? So we have the public sphere, we have the civil sphere, and we have the market sphere. And the economy of culture is not the same in the civil sphere as it is in the market sphere or in the public sphere.
Would you say then it's a mistake to cluster these into one cultural and creative sector?
No, I think that the issues that we will discuss here has arisen with the need to think in new ways about societal development and urban development. And I think what we have in Sweden is for 100 years we've had this welfare culture policy, which secures access to culture, but it doesn't secure conditions for doing culture. And that now meets urban planning that has a much more instrumental view on how should we think about urban development and urban design and so on. And I think urban planners many times forget that we have this other view that we, or at least politicians have until today in Sweden, wanted to support culture outside of the market. And it is important to understand the difference in logics between market economy and public economy.
Mm.
This becomes very complex now, but that's sort of at the basis. And I think politicians have started to realize that in order to make our national economy develop, we need to look at the creative businesses, which is a market economy. And then it's somehow easier to put all of these fuzzy activities together. So that's why they become labeled culture and creative industries or culture and creative sectors and so on. But, and I think this is many times not remembered, in a welfare state like Sweden, we have a welfare culture policy. Many of these notions come from either the US, where they have a very little state overall, or the UK that doesn't really, that's something that I argue that they don't have a culture policy.
Mm.
Then everything is market economy and businesses. But we don't have that situation in the Nordic countries. I think that's important. I'm sorry if I go into details now immediately, but I think this is very important, and I think that is lacking in many of the public discourses regarding creative activities and urban development, because you sort of forget that we have this other economy coming in, and how do you sort of negotiate public economy and market economy?
Mm. That leads me to the public economy and the public sector. Since you work there, Patric, and also you were, of course, one of the persons that made it happen that Uppsala made a bid for the European Capital of Culture.
Mm.
And this is, of course, that you recognized art and culture as important for the city. Could you tell us a bit more about why art and culture is important for Uppsala? Uppsala has the oldest church, the oldest university in Sweden, and so on. It's a lot of cultural history in Uppsala. But I guess there's also some idea of looking to the future.
Uppsala is very, very good at to be the oldest. That is one of the reasons why we wanted to try to write a bid for the ECOC 2029. But I believe that we need to start to look back a little. Uppsala tried to become ECOC already 2014, which meant that I had colleagues that wrote the bid book around 2007. At that time, we competed against Lund, we competed against Gävle and Umeå. And at that time in Uppsala, the beginning of 2000, we opened up in Swedish it's called Uppsala Konsert and Kongress, the new concert hall in Uppsala, which was a huge thing. I had the privilege to be an artistic producer at the concert hall for quite many years. But around this, we opened 2007. So we wrote the bid the same year. The atmosphere in Uppsala at that time was that we were the best. I mean, to compete against Lund, it was not even a competition in our point of view. And now when I'm saying in our, I don't mean me, but in Uppsala's. To compete against Gävle, I mean, it wasn't even a question. And then Umeå. 1 year after the bid was sent in, the decision came. And Uppsala became on the last place. This was a very good result, in my opinion, because the reason why Uppsala sent in the first bid for 2014 was that we thought that we deserved to win. And this is not an uncommon idea in Uppsala's culture field or sector. We are the oldest. We are the biggest and greatest, in our opinion, in some ways. But we're not. So 8 years ago, the EU Commission informed us that Sweden will be held the title again 2029. So of course the question arose, shall we now do it a second time? And of course it was the same politicians that were saying, of course we need to do this, because we have been developing our cities so much, so we really deserve it this time. And the question turns, or the project was in my lap, and I told them that okay, we could do something about this if we will have the ground ID. Why do we need it? And not the opposite. Why do we deserve it? And why do Uppsala need a push like this? Because we need to be honest. The European Capital of Culture today, it's not only a push. It's like a storm. It's a huge project. If we look at our European colleagues, I mean now Chemnitz in Germany is holding the title. I mean, their budget is like 1.3 miljarder billion, yeah. I mean, it's a huge budget. The state and the municipality in the regions goes in with half of the amount of that. Today in Sweden, just to have a perspective of how we are looking at culture on a state point of view, but also on a municipality point of view. The Swedish state says today that they can perhaps, and let's say perhaps, Kiruna doesn't even know yet how much money they will get from the state. It's like approximately 9 to 10 million euros. In a European point of view, it's nothing. It's absolutely nothing. Is it a small amount of money? No, it's a lot of money, but it's not in the project way. We needed new perspectives. That was the ground core, of course. We needed more voices to develop our city because it is developing all the time. It is one of the fastest city to develop in Sweden today. Of course, mostly because of the closeness to Stockholm. And I'm from Helsingborg, so I will not talk about Malmö at all. But the ECOP also became a way to open up the discussion, open up the dialogues, open up new kinds of partnerships in the city that wasn't placed at all. Because a lot of old structures was in hand before the ECOC. I mean, we worked with it for almost 8 years. And trust me, I didn't wrote the bid in 8 years. That would be chaos. But the process was for 8 years. Thousands and thousands of people were engaged in the project, also during the pandemic. The final bid that were sent in to the panel, we have over 240 different partners involved in the project. We did something that haven't been done before in Uppsala, which lead us to the perspectives that you are presenting as well.
Because I know that you also had an approach to also have an urban fair, a city fair, and also involved urban planning in the process.
Absolutely.
And that also leads me to that you chose this theme of between the lines.
Yeah.
Could you tell us a bit more about why and what does it mean?
Would you like to?
No.
Yeah.
I would love to hear another perspective of between the lines.
No, I will comment the whole ECOC afterwards.
Perfect. In an urban planning perspective, I mean, it was all about to figure out what we will do with the so to speak, the in-between spaces. Because you mentioned the urban fair that we were working with also together with the ECOC. And that has all about three new city nodes.
Nodes?
And four former nodes are now creating a new kinds of layer or a connection with a tram. So all of a sudden we realized that people from different parts in Uppsala, different parts in society will all of a sudden be connected, which hasn't been the case at all in Uppsala for hundreds and hundreds of years. But the between the lines is also, of course, about the highlight what is perhaps overlooked, perhaps also what is so to say science, what is in the margins, and of course the unspokenness. All this is culture. And we can find some new ways with culture to fill up the lines that is, so to speak, between.
And this is something that you continue with. You haven't stopped working with this even since you didn't win the ECOC bid.
I mean, the ECOC was, as I said before, it was a push or a storm. But I am closely working with the urban planning people, the academy, the civic societies, the arts sector. Still, of course, I mean, it's not that far. I mean, the decision came in December, the 6th. The 7th of December, we started to continue our work, of course. Still, it was a Saturday, but still.
Okay. And Katja, you had a comment on this?
Yes, I think this your story in Uppsala and the whole phenomenon of European capitals of culture really illustrates very well what I think is the core of this discussion. There has been, since at least the 1990s, a criticism of the European capitals of culture, partly regarding what is the purpose of this, and you were mentioning that, but usually researchers and people in the culture field say that it's more about urban development than the core arts. And I had a colleague at Stockholm University that researched Stockholm when it was European Capital of Culture in 1998. And already then there was this huge criticism that all this money is poured in from the state, from the municipality and so on, but what is the legacy of this? So looking at what happens after this year, where does the money go, I think would be very, very interesting to look at. And there has been research and studies on this. And I do think that it's interesting. I understand that there is need for urban development, but I think it's interesting to also to look at this from that other side. So what does this kind of enormous investment actually, how does that benefit, for example, the non-profit cultural actors?
And I know this leads us towards our combining culture and urban planning. And also then I mentioned Richard, Florida, which is a main protagonist for having culture as a method for becoming attractive cities. I think we have left that actually, mostly in urban planning, but it's on the rise, at least among the private developers. And I know, Matthias, that you have said that we need cultural workers in the room, so to say, when we work with urban planning, but maybe even when we work with these massive cultural events that are mostly actually perhaps city branding.
Yeah. Just a short anecdote is that, like in Denmark or in Copenhagen, we say that the success of Copenhagen in the past 30 years is the bridge to Sweden, it's a metro, and it's a cultural capital in '96. So it's like really, it has, for Copenhagen, it's played a really big role. But the city at that time was also a really, really different place than today. I mean, the city of Copenhagen was almost bankrupt. People were like fleeing from the city. There were only old people and young people left in the city. So it's also like we have to take in mind what like situation the city is, because I think in some cases it can be really, really a game changer for a city. But yeah, your question was?
No, we talked before this, and you said that the cultural actors and the cultural perspectives are lacking in urban planning.
Yeah, yeah.
And you can tell us more.
Yeah, we for last 10 years in Copenhagen, cultural development has like been situated in old harbor areas, like temporary, before the urban development like really took on. So for many urban developers or private commercial developers, it's been like a tool to create more value for the urban areas, and then of course sell them to a higher price in the end. But I think many of the commercial developers are also like now acknowledging that it's really important to create more livable neighborhoods on the long run, because it all, like from a commercial perspective, it's also really good because you have many new apartments is rents where you can rent them out, and if you have like people that are happy for the neighborhood, they won't move out, and it's cheaper and that's better business case for the private developers. But what we try to do in Copenhagen Creative Partnership is also what you mentioned, like taking the most commercial economy, the development economy, and bringing it together with the more like creative economy. And it's really interesting things that is happening, because, and it is difficult sometimes for them to like just like have them in the same room, because it's totally two different languages they are speaking. But I think it's really interesting to, and it's not like, it's not always a good thing, because it can also be, sometimes can be quite superficial what you can say, but we're working with pilot projects in the city of Copenhagen, where I try to, okay, we have a urban development area, can we try to do new models in terms of urban development to create space for urban, for creative actors and so on. And actually it's getting better, and we are seeing now pilot projects where we try to, on the ground floor, it can just like be the ground floor, where we try to make new models where it can be lower rent in the ground floor, and then creative actors can be there. And then of course maybe the highest floor is then more expensive. So it's like when we're talking about like commercial urban development, it's really like spreadsheets and economy, but right now that's just the way it is. So we're trying to, yeah.
And then a question for perhaps you two and Patric as well, but because you mentioned this, it's hard to have different perspectives in the same room. It's also different economies and ideas about who profits from this. And many in the cultural sectors, feel that they are being instrumentalized, that they are putting in work but doesn't benefit much from this. And there are good examples to show that this has happened. So how can you avoid that? Have you any examples, any good examples to say that, well, if you do like this, it turns out better?
It's really a good question because it is difficult, but what we're seeing now, for instance, in Refshaløen in Copenhagen, which is really a big harbor area, they are like, of course, or at least they are saying that really want to like, they have created this really nice creative neighborhood, and they want to like keep it also when they're trying to, or they're developing the area. But I guess it's just having the people in the same room from the start of the process of urban development project is really helpful, and not like actually just to speak together, understand the different logics of the different actors, and it's also like from my perspective, the creative sector has sometimes been not so good as telling what value they are creating. Mostly also because they're not organized in the same way. It's like if you're an artist, you're like interested in your art and not in what economy you're creating. So just to bring people together and try to also organize the creative sector in a bit better way than previously is also a really good thing in order to emphasize the value they're creating, and then look at new models in the.
So we need new models, we need good examples and so forth. And maybe Patric first, and then I will turn to Kite.
One of the best examples that I've seen in Scandinavia is Aarhus and the project with the name Institute for X, that the organization Bureau Editors created 8 years perhaps before Aarhus was ECOC in 2018, 19, 17. Yeah. And it was the old trailway center, something like that. But what they knew was that they could be there for 10 years. After that, it was like a bulldozer day. That was the project day. So the municipality said that, okay, you can actually be here, like a culture-free zone, if you want. You don't need to pay anything. Just develop your business. You're not allowed to sleep or to live there, but just use it. What happens was that the urban planners started to show this interest, and to not only show it interest, it started to be an idea of how the area should develop, which is quite interesting. In Uppsala, we don't have that kind of space. Unfortunately, no one has. But the idea to have this degentrification structured in our system is extremely hard. Because what is the timeline? Is it okay to be degentrificated in 15 years, or is 5 years enough? Or, I mean, how much time do we need to find new possibilities or new options?
Why not forever? That's a good time perspective for
Good
culture,
luck
I
with
think.
that.
But Katja, I wanna turn to you because picking up a bit on this, because we can see on a European level there is a recognition and a need for arts and culture that can foster more creative and more innovative businesses, and also creative places and cities. You can see it in, for example, New European Bauhaus that combines technology and art. You can see it in European Capital of Culture, of course. Maybe if the outcome may not be the what everyone wishes for. And you can see there's a lot of money put into what's called a KIC. It's called EIT, Culture and Creativity, which is a lot of money, and it's at Uppsala University, and I know some part in Lund and Region Skåne is working with it. So there is, of course, money and directed towards these culture and creative sectors. But sometimes the idea what the money should do clashes with cultural actors that want to work with culture, not urban development, not city branding. Can we overcome this? Because you said before that we need to have this cluster of sectors together, but there's a lot of clashes in this, I see.
Yeah. Yes. I didn't say that we need to have the CCIs or the CCSs together, but politicians use that kind of discourse because it's easier to categorize something that seems to be similar. Anyway, I actually wanted to come back to the issue of the spaces of culture and society first. It's exactly this challenge that Matthias was talking about between how do you develop new parts of a city, or how do you retain the diversity of a city over time, I think is interesting, and time matters actually. What I've been doing the last year, and actually I will continue doing this year, is that I have been exploring the sort of the fundamentals of the spaces for culture and society for the Culture Committee of the region of the Greater Gothenburg area. And this report is actually out there digitally. You can read it. It's in Swedish. But what these politicians want to understand is really how can we work with this long term, because they recognize that there is a certain economy. You need to have attractiveness in order to get people to want to live in a city. So there's one economic dynamic when you build a new part of a city, like the old harbor area or something. But over time, the challenges change. You have old industrial buildings that sort of have a completely different economy. And I know that both in Gothenburg and in Malmö, what is a challenge today is that the old industrial buildings disappear because of gentrification and the actual need of people moving in. So what they did was actually to say, okay, how can we think about this long term? And that's what I've been investigating. And again, I come back to this difference between the public economy and the market economy. And it's the tough role of politicians to sit in between those, because the market economy goes where there is a market, but the politicians have to stay with, the social needs of people. So they have this not very glamorous position of having to balance very different interests in society. And I think, coming back to your direct question, I think that where this idea of culture and creative skills and competence, as I would call it, comes in. because I think we also agree that we can see the benefit of the creative sort of competence of this group of people. But what is difficult is to channel it, as you say, into something that is much more instrumental. And this is what they are trying to do now with the new European Bauhaus and the EU overall. They try to say, okay, we have this asset, which is the creativity of people in general, but in particular a certain professional group. How can we use that resource that we already have, and they are doing things in society? How can we tap into that and make Europe become even better? So that is sort of the political view on this, and this becomes very complex again, but I think that's the political background for these attempts to try to get artists into building and urban development and so on. And of course it's instrumental, because that's also an important part for political actors. They want to change society, so I don't really have an answer, but that is sort of the thing, that that's the complexity of this field, that you both have this, the market actors, and then you have those who just want to do their art and don't want to sell out or whatever. So I don't have an answer, but I think it's really at the core, and I think it's also important to mention that the EU is not a nation state like Sweden, so they can't have a traditional culture policy like Sweden's. They have to be instrumental, otherwise we as taxpayers, we will say, so what are you using our hard-earned tax money for? So it is very complex, but again, coming back to the European Capitals of Culture, understand the criticism from the most core arts professionals, that it's only about getting the economy to turn and so on. But it's kind of, in society we need both.
Could we say then that there's a on the big scale, there's not a lack of money?
No.
But it doesn't always end up in the right place to do what we actually need, which is not a new problem, of course. I would just have a short opening, because I know that you've been listening now. Maybe you've been thinking something, a comment or a question that you want to raise and cannot hold on. So there's a small opportunity.
And there goes the opportunity.
No, there will be one. Then you know. Now you're prepared for your question at the end. Patric, you wanted to comment here.
Just a short comment. During our process, we were in contact with approximately 25 different European cities that were all competing to be ECOC in Poland, Belgium, Cyprus, Finland, some other countries as well. In Poland, there were 12 different cities that competed. In France, it was like 10 or 8. In Sweden, there were 2. That's a big shame. It's not just a shame, it's much more than that. That a country like Sweden, with the growth that we have and the perspective that we see as a very good and wealthy country, there is only 2 cities that actually, so to speak, are brave enough to compete in a project like this.
Yeah.
You could see it like that. But every other cities that we talked about, their focuses was on urban planning and how culture can be a creative part of that. Everyone is looking at the same questions, And it doesn't matter if I walked into Bielsko-Biała in Poland or Bourges in France. Everyone was looking at the same questions during this 10 years time. So it's everywhere, which is not good.
This I want to bring back also the term ecosystem and cultural ecosystems. I mentioned in the beginning here in my introduction about how Intonal has a background history of more years behind it, many more people, ecosystem locally, regionally, and so on. And I mentioned SHAPE, which is a EU-funded program that offers artists and organizations to make exchanges between different places within Europe and even beyond. And I had a chat with Michal Brenner in Meat Factory in Prague to see what are the benefits of these kind of networks and these kind of ecosystems. And I want to share them first so we can have some input from these kind of festival and venues that are across Europe. Some of them outside the market economy and even the public economy, somewhere. Some of them totally depending on the public economy, and some of them where there's a lack of public funding. They have to find their own ways. But they connect with each other. And that is because they want to see a development of art and culture. They want to find possibilities, opportunities. And often this is connected to venues that offer this. And we have a neighbor here, not a neighbor, but there's an office for Trans-Europe Hall in Lund that collects these or cluster these different venues across Europe. And I know they also have to raise this question of where in the city can we be? Where are there spaces for these kind of cultural actors? That's kind of the basic infrastructure needed. And then, of course, you need the possibility to both produce new culture, art, and to meet audiences. And one thing that Michal told me that the network itself creates exchanges between promoters, producers, so they can help each other out to find artists, share fees, and so on, and make it more doable, specific projects. And they also sometimes then reach the possibility of actually commissioning special works, and they can offer them a tour. This wouldn't have had been possible if these promoters and producers never met. So there's a lot of ecosystems on different levels. We have the infrastructure, we have the promoters, we have the artists, which the artists also meet at these festivals and so on, and they see another artist. Oh, you inspire me. Can we do something together? And that kind of push is also giving energy and kind of fostering this ecosystem so it can thrive. So there are different perspectives on this. And of course, money is an issue always, but let's not get stuck there. Let's talk about the other versions. How can we? Of course, Michal also said that at the end, more money is actually what would be good for us, because then we can keep doing these things. But things happen because other reasons as well, because these ecosystems and networks exist. And I see that Copenhagen Creative Partnership is kind of jacking into this ecosystem. you're collecting people, they are members, and you do events, and you try to talk about these things and invite people to come listen to us and give us your ear for a moment so we can tell you about our perspectives. But I want to know, what are the main threats to these cultural actors that you see?
Well, we normally say that for creating like a inspiring creative environment, you have to have like low rents. You have to have spaces that like fostering creative people, that maybe where you have a room that is 5 meters tall instead of like 2 meters in new buildings. And you have to have an environment, so you have to have like other creative people. So the threats are the opposite. It's like high rents, it's new built houses that are, or buildings that are like really not really fostering any creative minds. And of course, the people are getting spread out all around the city. So that's basically what we're seeing, especially in the new neighborhoods in Copenhagen right now, and I guess also many other bigger cities in Europe. And the interesting question is, of course, is why is it bad? But that was also like the first question you had, because for me personally, it's not about the specific artist or the specific artist. It's more like for the city as a whole, because I really believe we are creating awful cities if we don't have that creative vibe in the city. But it's really, as you also mentioned, it's really complex to solve these problems. But I also think there's like a possibilities in the complexity, because if we're talking about old harbor areas, we also talk about, especially in Denmark right now, we're talking about how can we not just tear down old buildings because they have a resource, and we talk about climate crisis and so on. We have to use the resources as we have. So you said use the like environment as we have, but also like the buildings that we have. So like linking different aspects of together, I think it's really a possibility to, I mean, if we have an old shipyard, just keep the building, then you have way more easier access to creating a creative neighborhood, then you can build houses on top of it. I don't know, something spectacular maybe. So that's think outside the box, and it's interesting thing. We also talked about the people in Denmark, urban planners in Denmark, still come to Malmö to see Bonolit because it's the most inspiring place in all of the Nordic countries, because it's really where they try to experiment and so on. And from Denmark, that's something we never tried. So it's really business as usual in Denmark. So just to go to Sweden, also been in Linköping to see Vallastaden, where we also try to experiment. So if you can like try to experiment way more, and think of new models, that's the way we should do it, I think.
I think there are people in here that want to also say that there are other places in Malmö that you maybe should visit as well, beyond.
It's just to say that, like the example, it's really remarkable that
I see.
a place 25 years ago still attracts people from Denmark, urban planners.
Yeah,
mostly.
but when we talk about threats, also that when media, for example, give attention to these cultural actors, it's often a special venue or a theater or something that now they are under threat because of the rent, which is of course the way it is. But you said also that if we focus too much on the specific, the singular space, but it's a structural problem.
Yeah, for me. And the good thing is, it's actually, as you also talked about, it's just a political question. I mean, it's really easy to solve this problem, like on the paper. It's hard to, and it's about taking the tempo out of urban development, and it's about like trying, to use the resources that we have, and not just build new houses and. But it's difficult because many cities are experiencing like urbanization and population growth and higher living costs. But in Denmark we have like a social housing model. I guess you also have that in some way in Sweden. And
We don't.
Okay.
We are very
Okay.
cautious about not having social housing in Sweden.
Okay.
So I just want to.
But from my
No, we don't.
like from my perspective, we should also have like a creative environment model. Like how can we like also incorporate creative businesses in urban development?
And that leads me directly to you and your book. And I know you were in Gothenburg recently because you've been working with, was it the city or the region?
The region,
Yeah.
but the occasion was actually for local actors in
Okay.
the city of Gothenburg. So.
But then, from your perspective, your research, and from working with them, do you have any other solutions, any proposals, recommendations for creating these spaces, making them available?
Actually, what I say in the report was and is that municipalities and regions have the tools that they need. The problem is that they maybe don't know what are good examples and so on.
And what are the tools?
So municipalities and also regions, they can have property that they rent out at a lower. They can decide the rent level.
A bit like what Matthias
Yeah,
said about
yeah,
social housing comparison.
But then it's important to remember that there are general rules about the economy of municipalities and regions and so on. But they already use that. And for example, I know that in the municipality of Lund and also in the city of Gothenburg, they actually use this. I'm sure it also is the case in Malmö, but I haven't looked specifically at Malmö. So they do have that. They also have, I have to emphasize that the welfare culture policy in Sweden means that independent arts organizations receive money to go and rent spaces out there. They don't have to be in a specific public space. And I think that's very valuable. Then this model has limitations, and that I think was really the basis for them giving me this assignment to inquire into this. Because what happened was that independent arts organizations who rent with either public or private landlords, they were struck by inflation and the increase in rents. So there is this challenge that the grants to culture organizations are not matched with the increase in rent levels, which is a problem. There is, however, a solution to that. Some municipalities have a system where the municipality rents their own buildings. And this is a bit complex, but there are some figures in the report. And then they decide, okay, we have this many spaces, and we then sublet them to culture organizations. The benefit of that is that they can match, the grants to cultural actors with the actual cost of these facilities. But what this means is that they have to say, okay, we can afford this many spaces. So it's again this, what is the public economy, what is the private economy, and so on. So there are benefits and drawbacks and so on. So those are just a few examples, but
are there any tools that are more in the planning of the city that you can do? I think, for example, a tool that is invented, you could say, in Malmö is the kulturljudzon in Sorgenfri, where you basically have a detailed plan that says we allow a higher loudness in this area, which then kind of closes the possibility to build housing.
I mean, they have this tool of urban planning, which is actually a contrast to market solutions that we can see in the US or in the UK and many parts of the world, where the public authorities say we don't involve ourselves in property development and management. Then the market is completely free, and we don't have that. And I think that is important, because then the actual municipalities can say, they have in Gothenburg, for example, this thing called byggrätt, which means that the city owns the land. This is becoming very technical, but the city owns the land, and then it sells the right to build properties on that. What this means is that the municipality can say, you have to make sure there is space for culture and so on. So they actually have these tools. The problem is that we were talking about time frames. A cultural actor might think that 10 years is a long time. But our municipalities have to plan for at least 100 years.
Yeah.
So that is a challenge. That how can you capture this? What we find attractive is the sort of fast-moving creativity. But it's also important for municipalities to think of, when should we not step in and plan? You know, we have this criticism in Sweden of the social planning, where you try to put everything into its proper place, and then you lose somehow this vitality, which is what we find attractive. So the challenge again for municipalities is to know, when should we interfere with public sort of measures, which are very square and so on, and where should we leave the vegetation to sort of develop on its own? And that's tricky.
And then you've been talking a lot about municipalities and the tools they have, and we have a person from a municipality, and I know you want to comment, but I'm gonna turn it into a question here.
Okay.
Because and it's a bit of a personal history, because Patric has a background organizing clubs and producing festivals in Uppsala. Started at the student houses. Is that correct?
Student Nation.
Student Nations.
Or student house.
Stuff like they have in Lund, you know, not here in Malmö. From there, you did a lot of things, and now you're a bureaucrat in cultural planning municipality.
Thank you, Matthias.
Which is, I say this because I have a big admiration for bureaucrats and bureaucracy, actually, if it's has a prefix that is creative. And what we hear here, that there's a lack of things. There's a lack of infrastructure, a lack of spaces, a lack of possibilities for artists, organizations, networks, and so on. And if you then have this ambition to foster culture and creativity between the lines happening in some ways all over Uppsala, what can you do? What do you do to make this happen?
For me personally, it took perhaps something around 15 years till I got in contact with Uppsala Municipality after living in Uppsala Municipality for 40 years. Perhaps not 15, let's say 10 years. I mean, when we were arranging clubs and exhibitions and everything else in the culture field, I mean, we never contacted the municipality to ask if this is this possible. Could I please have a document that says that this techno club will be arranged? No, we just did it. Sometimes, or quite a lot today. I meet young people that is asking me if they want to do something for the first time. Could we do a club at the council hall? Or could we do an art exhibition at the art museum? It's like, no, you shall absolutely not do that. I mean, my path hasn't been straight at all. But I'm here because of that path. I mean, I'm quite convinced that my role today is not to, my role is to enable possibilities. My role is to actually step away in the right second. You need to figure out what second it is. Because I've seen so many examples of colleagues that they want to be a part of the energy. So that means that they are staying in the project or staying in the idea for too many times or for too long. That is.
So
Which means that the ground core of energy that we are talking about skrapas ner. Sorry. So I mean, what I'm doing 8 meetings every day is actually to talk about this. Because what I also notice is that it takes a lot of time with urban development. I mean, is just how it is. What we are planning today, we will see in 10 to 15 years. But we need to be aware of that the changes that we can do now will benefit in 10 years' time, which is okay in my perspective. But we need to be much, much faster as an enabler.
enabler, yes. And
In Uppsala, this is not the case, and it hasn't been the case, because usually in a municipality, which now you should stop the record, but my experience is that people is in the same positions for way too long, that they are in the power positions. That is very, very tricky in a city like Uppsala, or actually also Malmö, because the people with power is increasing. So we need to see the seconds where we shall go away from the room or go away from the project. That's the main thing.
so what I hear here and can figure out from all of you saying is that decision makers and municipalities and especially specifically need to offer opportunities, but step back to give space, and then not to give spaces that are already finished and planned perfectly, but also a bit undefined for others to define it. Is that? And then we're approaching the end of this, so I'm gonna ask you about. I want you to give some recommendations, some short recommendations, because we've been kind of circling around here that we want to see cities that flourish with culture and hope, I guess, a diversity of cultural expressions and also connections between different arts and culture and creative businesses also. And maybe also move away from this creative city that Richard Florida has put up there as something that is attractive for a special group of people that are the creative class, that are more actually consumers of culture. To move towards, I would say, Charles Landry. I want to give you something to read. Charles Landry actually put up the term creative class before Richard Sorda, not as popular though. But he talks about cities that need to thrive through making possibilities for people to be creative, to have access to others' cultural expressions, and not only, at least, by being consumers in a market economy. But what are the characteristics of that kind of creative city where a cultural ecosystem has something to feed on? And what does it need? I think this is what you're trying to do with Copenhagen Creative Partnership.
Yeah. Well, I guess like also I mentioned earlier, like when it comes to urban development, it's really a lot of business as usual thinking. So personally, for me, I'm just tired of what we tried yesterday. It didn't work. Now we're trying it again today. It doesn't work. So maybe we should try something new tomorrow. And basically, we need to experiment way more than we're doing today. We're not only, like, when it comes to urban development, just talking about, can we call it maybe a crisis of creativity, but also a biodiversity crisis, climate crisis, and so on. So we really, but if we think more holistic and think the crisis together and try to see new opportunities in these like crises, I think it can be really interesting. If we see at some of the most interesting cities today, all of them like rise from a burning platform, or what you call it. So I think it's now also time to like use the energy on try to rethink how we can do urban development.
And Katja, I turn to you, because I know also that you have, and I don't have the title in English for this book, but you have recommendations in this book about cultural businesses and cultural sector.
Yes, a few years ago I did a research study of culture and creative industries policymaking in Sweden. And I wrote a book in Swedish, which is actually available open access, because the aim was to make sure that everyone could read it, from practitioners to researchers. And then I also wrote a book in English. But that was basically developing culture and creative industries within the public sector, how they can support, how they can sort of help these fields and sectors to thrive. And I had some recommendations which you need to have in that kind of book. But I think I've sort of suggested a few solutions and so on. But I think what was mentioned here is that the experiment is very important. And I have this management and business administration background, and I see very strong similarities between culture actors on one hand and startups in business on the other. It's the same kind of energy that we are talking about. And I think what is important for the public actors is exactly to allow this experimentation, and then rather maybe to support this infrastructure that is very slow, it's very square and so on. But it's kind of, they are interdependent, you know, the very slow but expensive infrastructure that usually the public sector finances. But you also need, as a public actor, to step back, as we were hearing, because that's both what is the benefit of the business sector. I mean, that they are really fast. They experiment. Maybe they don't survive, but there will be other actors coming in and so on. And so it's again this double realization that you need to have that stability from the public sector, but you need also to allow these experimentation spaces. So and that also means not always giving culture actors the money that they are asking for, but rather to pressure them, because that's one of the characteristics of business support. If we go to business policy, you don't give the companies money because they need to survive on the market. What you give them is good advice and general support, but then they need to be out there to be relevant for the market. And I think that is actually the same with culture. It doesn't survive if it's not relevant for the people out there and so on. So again, you need to be there to be sort of the square the square partner in this equation.
Patric, you will have the last words here.
Just one short comment. This is one of our struggle when we are discussing the culture business, or the creative business, or the creative sector. Because this is you were talking about the creative business. We're not talking about the single poet or the single musician or the artist or a student that is working in this venue. It's something else. What I'm trying to what is the characteristics of a creative city? I'm happy to hear that you're talking about Charles Landry. I can highly recommend it as well, especially his latest book. But that's a later thing. I'm always talking about openness. That is what we need in our case in Uppsala. Open to new perspectives and new new type of persons that wants to be a part of the ecosystem. How can we create space for that? How can we actually be curious about that? 70% of all the people that is getting grants from the Uppsala Municipality got grants the year before. It's extremely hard to be a new collective or artist or initiative to get grants from the municipality, or it's even worse regarding the region. We need to break that idea of how to actually look at grants. Perhaps it's not a lifelong contract that you have with a municipality. But the problem is that we are not getting more money from the state or the municipality or the region. And hopefully we're getting more and more creative persons in the cities and in the regions. This is our main, so to speak, possibility or problem that we have today. In a long term, and absolutely as we see in a short term as well. How can we create spaces that aren't that expensive for the public sector? And how can we then perhaps not talk about Richard Florida's ideas of a creative city or a creative sector as it is, but as you started with, we are culture. We need to see this in another way, and we need to see money for the sector in another way as well. So, and I will continue to work at least 25 years. That's my plan. And I will work with this every day till I will never retire, but let's say that I will retire, because we have the best possibilities of doing it, but we need to struggle.
Thank you. I will, before we end, I also will again turn to you in the audience to have a comment, because I think it's important also to bring up something that you've already said, all three of you, that we need knowledge, and we need to share that knowledge, and we need to share perspectives. And you have shared your perspective. Your perspectives and knowledge is very much needed, and to continue that process of meeting, talking, discussing, and even find those clashes that are also important where there's a conflict. We shouldn't just sing together. We need to also argue sometimes.
Do we need to argue?
Yeah, sometimes. I have a microphone if there's someone who kind of thinks about something but need some more seconds. This is on. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for a very interesting discussion. I'm very curious more about the municipality perspective, since I have been working in municipality with urban planning. So I have a question for Patric. We're talking a lot about different types of ecosystems here, and collaboration and networking between ecosystems in the cultural sector. Are you also working with that in the municipality, like with different municipalities, and how could that evolve?
There's different kinds of answers to that question. If we are working with other municipalities, the answer to that must be yes. And then it would be easy to say that yes, we have a dialogue with Stockholm, Gothenburg, and Malmö. But if we just skip that and look at the region instead. Uppsala is by far the biggest municipality in the region, which means that of the 9 other municipalities, half of them doesn't even have a culture policy. Which means as well that when we are working with questions like this, we need to work with the urban planners. But the urban planning department in a municipality with like 25,000 people is quite small. But that is exactly what we are doing with the urban planners and the art field in the different kinds of municipalities around us. But it is, you need to be really humble, is my experience, to do that jump. Because we come in with different kinds of muscles and ideas that the smaller municipalities doesn't have a chance to take care of. But the answer is yes, but it is quite. It's not easy. In Skåne. And now I'm quite afraid of saying this, but I'm saying it. My feeling is that Region Skåne is quite good at these questions. And now we will shut down the recordings again, because I believe that Region Skåne is far better than Region Uppland or Uppsala is in these questions today, which means that I need to take that responsibility as the biggest municipality in the region, which is a question of power, which is always tricky, I must say.
And Katja, do you also
Yeah, I
wanted to
just
comment?
wanted to add to that exactly what you were mentioning, Patric, that regions are usually, they both have the resources and kind of the time to reflect on what could benefit the whole region. So I think they are important actors in this. And as I said previously, it was actually the region of Greater Gothenburg that gave me this assignment to look into the spaces of culture. And then as a second suggestion, I would like to raise Familjen Helsingborg, which is a cooperation between Helsingborg and the surrounding municipalities that have the same kind of character. Helsingborg is by far the largest municipality, and then you have a lot of rural small municipalities around it. So again, I would say that collaboration is important, because then you can sort of you can share ideas, you can share knowledge building and so on. So I think that's also a very good example to look at.
And it is quite funny that the name of that is Familjen.
Yes,
I'm just,
Well-
let's leave that aside.
Thank you very much, Patric, Katja, and Matthias, for being guests here and talking about this. I hope you also will enjoy some of the festival. And of course, you who have been listening, enjoy the events that will go on here at 5 o'clock. There's a concert here at Interart Center. The doors downstairs at Inkonst open at 7. William Basinski is back again in Malmö. I hope you enjoy it. Starts at 7:30. Thank you very much. Applause to you.